Hello everyone, I'm Ethan. Before we start, if you love true stories, the kind that seep under your skin and stay there, go ahead and tap like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Now take a breath. We're stepping into a place where the world goes quiet and the trees remember more than we do. Picture a high country morning in eastern Idaho. The light is clean, almost surgical. It slices the pines in pale shafts and turns the dust into glitter. The air smells like sap and wet stone and the cold metal bite you get when snow hangs on the highest ridges even in June. Underfoot, the forest floor is a quilt of needles and lichen, springy and hushed, the kind of silence you can hear. A man moves through this quiet like he belongs to it. His name is Eric Chun. He's 32, a wildlife photographer from Boise, the sort who carries patience the way other people carry car keys. Eric knows how to sit on the edge of a clearing for 6 hours, because an elk cow and her calf bedded down there last week, and sometimes lightning strikes twice. He knows what wind does to scent, what light does to shadow, and how the forest will test you just to see if you're serious. He's 8 miles from the nearest Forest Service road, deeper than most day hikers go. Far enough that the silence feels like pressure. He steps carefully, sets his pack down, eases his camera free, and peers through the glass at a corridor of trees that might, if the universe is feeling generous, produce a bull elk with antlers like winter bear branches. He waits, breathes, waits longer, and then it happens. Something small, sharp, wrong. A flicker of light out of rhythm with everything else. Not the shimmer of leaves or the quicksilver flash of a bird's wing. This is hard, angular. It stabs his eye and turns his head, and before he knows why, Eric is lowering his camera and squinting into the green. He steps forward. Another step. The light disappears and then returns at a slightly different angle, which is how he knows it's real. He plants his boots where the duff will hold him steady and raises a hand to block the glare, and that's when he sees it. Hanging from a low branch at eye level is a set of car keys. He stops, puzzled, because nothing about that belongs here. Keys in a place like this are like an alarm clock on the ocean floor. Technically possible, but the story behind it would have to be strange. He moves closer, slowly, as if the keys might spook. The branch they dangle from is rough and resin sticky and strong enough to hold a small weight for a very long time. The metal teeth are dulled with corrosion, the edges sanded by 23 summers and 23 winters. The fob, a Honda oval, has surrendered its red to the sun. From a ring hangs a small laminated photograph, milky with age inside a yellow plastic sleeve. Eric's throat clicks when he swallows. He tells himself to breathe. You find weird things in the woods sometimes, hat brims, lost gloves, a child's balloon collapsed into a pale lung in the brush. People leave marks and forget them, but this is arranged. Not lost, not dropped. Hung deliberate. He leans in. The plastic crinkles against the keys. Behind the photo is a folded piece of paper, the kind you'd tear from a notebook you kept for shopping lists or meeting notes. Eric's hands are careful because he knows enough not to smudge fingerprints or leave his own DNA where it doesn't belong. He holds the bag up to the light, and the photograph catches a thin blade of sun. For people stare out at him from a happier time. A father with a weekend tan and a polo shirt. The casual armor of a man who takes care of things. A mother with soft shoulders and that late 90s hair, blown out and neat. A look you see in yearbooks and multiplex posters from a kinder moment. 2 girls in matching dresses. The older one trying to be composed because she's 9 and grown-ups are watching. The younger one 6 and unable to hide the electricity of being alive. Their smiles are uncomplicated. They're the kind you don't work for. They just happen when someone you love says your name. Under it, folded tight and softened by damp, is the note. He tells himself he shouldn't open it, but he also knows that paper left in a forest will die piece by piece and lose whatever was trying to say. He unseals the plastic and pinches the note by its corners. The smell of old ink and wet cardboard lifts into the air. He unfolds once, twice. The letters on the page are blue and steady, a little bled at the edges, but not the frantic scratch of panic. The handwriting belongs to someone who, even with the ground dropping away under his feet, is trying to stay organized. If someone finds this, we walk toward the smoke. Eric reads. He stops and reads again, slower. It isn't smoke. It's steam from hot springs. A van, green, 1998 Dodge Caravan. Somewhere along a Forest Service road with a number you could miss if you blinked. Overheated engine. Coolant leak. 8 hours on foot looking for a ranger station or a highway. Thinking the columns rising in the distance meant people, radios, help. Names: David. Linda. Emma, 9. Sophie, 6. Please help. At the bottom, the date, August 13th, 2001. 5:30 p.m. He stares at the numbers for a long time. Because dates can be tricks. They can look like yesterday until you pull back and see that they belong to another lifetime. He does the math automatically, the way you do when you see a kid and think, kindergarten already? 23 years. He feels the forest lean closer. The silence changes. A jay calls once and then thinks better of it. Eric slides his phone out his pocket. The small slab of glass and radios that wouldn't have made a difference in 2001. And checks the sky. Enough signal for a call if he climbs the hummock to his right. He takes a photo first. Keys exactly as they hang. Note exactly as it rests. The angle of the branch against the background of bark, so anyone who needs it can find it again. Then he climbs and he calls. 3 hours later, he is still standing at the tree when the first ranger steps into the clearing. Eric can't tell you what he thought about during those 3 hours, except that he tried not to imagine the sound of little girls' laughter getting thinner as it travels between pines and vanishes into steam. He hears the pop of brush under boots, the tempo of trained people moving fast, then the low murmur of protocol taking over. He lifts a hand. They see the keys. The hush deepens. Everyone is very careful. The way those keys arrived in that tree will reopen a case that never really closed in the hearts of the people who had to live with it. A summer road trip, that didn't come home. A family from Phoenix, David and Linda Martinez and their 2 daughters, headed north for Yellowstone. Their van found dead and locked on a gravel road no one could agree was a good idea even on a clear day. You can draw a bright line from those keys back to the morning the Martinez family left Phoenix. It was August of 2001, which, if you were alive then, you remember as a month that carried some fragile light you didn't know you were going to lose. Social media wasn't a planet yet. Phones flipped and had ringtones that sounded like carnival rides. The news talked about shark attacks because it was summer and nothing very bad was happening. The word September still felt like school supplies and football. David Martinez is 38 in the photo, but in your head, he reads younger. He's a civil engineer, which means he believes in cause and effect and the way problems shrink when you draw them on paper. He's an early adopter for exactly one thing at a time. The Garmin handheld GPS in the glove compartment was his splurge. He trusts tech up to the point where it needs a satellite. After that, he trusts a good map and the feel of the road under his hands. Linda is 36. She teaches 4th grade, which means she understands chaos in a way the Marines would respect. She keeps lists and stacks and a gentle force that turns a plan into a memory. She is the gravity that holds the 4 of them together in orbit. Emma is 9 and try on the future, like it's a jacket she can't quite fill yet. She reads about animals and raises her hand in class even before she knows the answer, because she loves the feeling of going for it. Sophie is 6 and collects rocks because each one might be the first rock of a new universe only she can see. She loves the sound of the word Yellowstone because it feels like a color and a promise. They leave Phoenix on a Saturday with the van clean and the tires rotated and the oil changed, because David is not a man who leaves things to chance if he can help it. Linda has a route printed and highlighted. They stop in Las Vegas for a night because you have to do it once. Even with kids, they swim in a motel pool that smells like 1,000 summers stacked on top of each other and drive the strip with the windows up, pointing out lights and fountains, and the way the world is very loud when it wants to sell you something. On Sunday, they push north, Utah, then Idaho, then Yellowstone if the miles go down the way miles are supposed to. They make Tremonton by dinner. Emma reads at the table while the waitress calls everyone Han. Sophie builds a pyramid out of sugar packets and insists on carrying it carefully back to the room until Linda convinces her that treasures are better when you find them yourself. They watch a little TV. David sets the alarm for early because their reservation at Madison Campground will evaporate at 4 p.m. if they don't make it. He promises 8 a.m. departure. No problem. Monday morning begins exactly the way promising days do. They wave at the desk clerk. They merge onto I-15 North, and the van hums like it's grateful to be going somewhere good. The sky is big. The girls count billboards for jerky and fireworks and coffee. Linda traces a line of the interstate on the paper map with her finger, even though the road is straight and the day is young. David thinks about where they'll stop for lunch and whether it's worth cutting a corner here or there to hit the campground with time to spare. That's the thing about detours. When they arrive, they speak in a voice that makes perfect sense. About 30 miles south of Idaho Falls, a sign appears. Forest Service Road 376. Scenic Overlook 14 miles. It's the kind of sign that invites you to make a memory. 14 miles is nothing when you've come this far. You stretch your legs. You take a photo you put on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a bison. You get back on the highway and roll into Yellowstone by 2. David signals and turns. The first few miles are tame, paved, 2 lanes, a ribbon unspooling through the trees. The girls press faces to glass and declare this is what forests are supposed to look like. The pavement ends. Gravel begins. Washboards chatter through the steering wheel. David slows. He could turn around, but the road has become a story he's already telling. It narrows. The mile markers don't exactly line up with the promise of 14, but you tell yourself that's just how roads are out here. Someone measuring with a different yardstick. The forest cinches tight around the van. The sun comes and goes. A rattle starts in the engine that wasn't there before, and then the temperature gauge climbs the way a nightmare climbs, smoothly, relentlessly. He kills the engine before it kills itself. The quiet that follows is the wrong kind. It's the silence, a thing that won't do what you ask of it. He props the hood. Steam goes into the trees. A hose is cracked. Not all the way, but enough that the green lifeblood of the engine has bled into the gravel and pine needles. No signal on the Nokia. No other vehicles for her. He tries to add it up and comes up with too long. The road back is 12 miles of not much. The road ahead is 2 more miles of even less. The girls need lunch. The map doesn't show this road because the map was never interested in roads this thin. He gets the Garmin. Satellites find him the way stars find sailors. He watches the little arrow settle and thinks, okay. Highway 20 is 4 miles northeast if you fly. He looks up, beyond the trees, past a rise. 3 pale columns lift into the sky like breath on a cold day. Smoke, he thinks at first. Then he thinks again. Smoke means people. People means radio. Radio means help. It's 2 miles away, maybe 3. They could walk that before the sun hits the top of the firs. Linda counts water bottles. She weighs snacks against distance. She is not reckless, but she is also not someone who teaches her daughters to be afraid of the world. They lock the van because you lock the van. It's what you do. David pockets the keys without thinking about how keys are only useful if there's something to unlock. Emma laces up and declares this is an adventure. Sophie names the Dust Devils as they cross the road. The forest takes them in, and the van waits like a faithful dog that can't follow. Back in 2024, because that's a double exposure we're living with now. A detective named Laura Morrison will stand under the same sky with a drone buzzing somewhere higher than the birds and try to bend probability to her will. She will read the note that Eric found and draw a radius not from the dead van, but from the living choice. Walk toward the smoke. She will call in dogs whose noses ignore sulfur, pilots who can teach cameras to see heat through leaves, and cartographers who can turn a mountain into math. On that Monday in 2001, the Martinez family has none of that. They have a compass arrow on a small gray screen, and the belief that walking toward help is how help is found. They walk. The forest does what forests do. It presents choices that don't look like choices. Go left around this ravine, or right. Climb this slope, or that one. Detour around a tangle of deadfall that fell in the last windstorm, and will be here rotting into soil long after anyone remembers the names of the people who stepped over it. The steam grows stronger, and the smell does too, a rotten egg ghost that rides every breath. The closer they get, the more the ground looks wounded. Mineral scars, pale crust around pools that boil like the earth is cooking. When they reach it, it is nobody's campground. It's a field of small blue mouths in the dirt exhaling heat into the afternoon. There are no picnic tables, no bare boxes, no ranger with a hat brim you can be grateful for. The columns they saw from the van are here, because the world is thinner here and the fire under it is in a mood. You can't drink the water. You can't walk straight across because the earth itself says no. The path they hope for turns into a labyrinth drawn by someone who doesn't care if you solve it. David checks the Garmin and draws a line in his head back to the van. Southwest. Easy on paper, not easy in trees. They try. The ground insists on becoming an argument. Every time they push, a seam opens in front of them. A drop-off, a gully, another patch of heat you don't trust. The arrow on the screen keeps faith. Their legs begin to doubt. Hours go the way hours do when you're spending them. The light tilts. Water bottles get lighter. Voices get shorter around the edges. At some point, 5 in the afternoon, maybe a little later, David stops and does the thing engineers do when the problem starts to get bigger than the tools in the box. He takes stock. He writes. He tells the future what the present knows, so that the future can try to find the present later. He tears a page from his notebook and writes those clean, steady lines. The van's color, the road number, the mile marker, the names of the people he loves. The mistake that wasn't a mistake until it was. We walk toward the smoke. He slides a paper into a plastic bag Linda brought for trash, because the future hates moisture. He adds a laminated family photo, because the future hates doubt too. He threads the bag to the key ring and looks up into a sea of green for a branch that feels like the right height to meet a human eye. He hangs the keys and the note where someone who needed the truth could find it. If we pass this tree again, we'll know we're going in circles. It's logic, and it's love disguised as logic. It's a breadcrumb that won't dissolve. He tells his daughters they're leaving a sign for rescuers. Emma nods, because signs are how you get from here to there. Sophie asks if the rescuers will have a dog. Linda touches the back of his hand. They start walking again. They never see that tree again. Back in the clearing in 2024, the ranger takes a note from Eric with glove hands and slides it into a different plastic, one with a case number and a chain of custody. The forest exhales. Eric answers questions quietly. He shows him the photo he took before he touched anything, because he knows photographs are the only way to hold light in place. Someone marks coordinates. Someone else radios in a voice that's too steady for how it feels. By the time they hike out, the sun is bleeding into the tops of the pines, and the cold is coming down the gullies like an animal. When stories go missing, we tell them anyway. We fill gaps with guesses and call it speculation, call it narrative, call it memory if we need to, because a vacuum is worse. But every so often the woods give back a piece that isn't a guess. A set of keys, a note with names, a date that turns a past into a location. These are the things you can hold in your hand and feel the weight of. They don't explain everything. They don't have to. They tell you where to look next. The morning after the discovery, the map on the wall at the command post shifts. The center of gravity moves northeast, away from a van, into terrain that, for 23 years, didn't seem promising, because promising is a story we like to tell about search grids and probabilities. The steam fields that threw the dogs in 2001 get circled in a different color. A new line is drawn from the keys outward in the direction a tired family might have taken when southwest stops meaning anything you can see with your eyes. Eric goes home and uploads the photographs. He sits at his kitchen table longer than he means to, hands wrapped around a mug gone cold. He thinks about a father's neat handwriting and the way the plastic around the photo went buttery with age, but didn't give up. He thinks about the things we leave behind and whether we mean to. Somewhere in Phoenix, a woman in her 70s will answer phone and hear detectives say the words that both hurt and soothe. We found something. We think it's theirs. I keep thinking about that family photo. The way the four faces looked out at a future that wasn't promised and smiled anyway. The way the light had to be just right for Eric to see the glint, which means there were days, thousands of them, when the sun didn't find that angle and the keys were only keys waiting. If you spend enough time in places like this, you learn the wilderness is not cruel. It's simply indifferent. It doesn't hate you. It doesn't love you. It's busy being itself. And yet, it held that note for more than 2 decades like a message in a bottle wedged under a rock at low tide, waiting for the tide to turn. This story starts, for us, with a set of keys, but began for the Martinez family with a detour that felt like a gift. That's the part that makes your chest ache a little. Every choice they made sense when they made it. A turn toward a scenic overlook. A walk toward what looked like smoke. A note that was both a signal and a promise. We like to think tragedies grow out of big mistakes. Sometimes they grow out of reasonable decisions laid end to end until they cross a line you can't see until you've stepped over it. There's more to show you. There's a road they took and the moment the gauge climbed and the way the world gets thin near hot springs. There's the search that came after, the news cheerings, the tips that bend good people into bad directions, and the long quiet in between. There's what modern tools can see that 2001 couldn't, and what even modern tools can't make whole again. But that's for next time. For now, hold on to the image that turned a rumor back into a story. A low pine branch, a faded Honda fob, a laminated family photo softened by weather, but still strong enough to look you in the eye, and a note written in a calm hand that said, if someone find this, and then did exactly what I hoped it would do, they never see that tree again. Somewhere between the pines and the steam, the world folded in on itself. You could draw a map, trace the line of where they walked, but that map would never capture what happens when distance starts to lie to you. When everything looks familiar and strange at the same time. By the time David and Linda realized the sun had started to drop, the shadows had stretched into long fingers across the forest floor. The light was still golden, but it had that brittle quality, the kind that says the day's running out of time. They hadn't meant to wander far. In fact, every choice they made that day seemed perfectly reasonable, logical. For miles, maybe 5, and they'd reach the road or a ranger station. Someone would have a radio. They'd be back at the van by dark. Simple. But the wilderness doesn't measure distance the way humans do. For miles on paper can turn into 10 in the real world. When ravines cut you off, when brush grabs your ankles, when the path you thought you were following fades into nothing. By 3 p.m., the family reached the thermal area, the place they thought would save them. The air shimmered with heat. Pockets of steam hissed from the ground like the forest was breathing. The soil had turned from brown to pale white and yellow, crusted with minerals. Water bubbled in shallow pools, glowing a strange blue under the sunlight. To an engineer like David, it was fascinating and terrifying all at once. The heat radiating from the earth, the smell of sulfur in every breath. It was beautiful, but it wasn't safety. It was a dead end. He tried to laugh at the girls, to keep them calm. Well, he said, at least we found something. But Linda could see the change in him, the crease in his brow, the way he kept glancing at the GPS and then at the horizon, like he was trying to force the two to agree. The girls didn't notice at first. Sophie poked at the ground with a stick, watching the way the steam twisted around it. Emma sat on a rock, her face flushed, trying to read the compass on the GPS. Daddy, she asked, are we lost? David smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. No, sweetheart, he said. We're just turned around. Happens to everyone sometimes. They stayed there for maybe 15 minutes, long enough for the sun to slip lower, for the hope that someone else might appear to quietly die. Then David packed the GPS away and said, we're heading back. Except there was no back. The steam had blurred their memory of how they came in. The terrain looked different from this angle. Every ridge looked like the one before. Every tree was just another tree. He pointed southwest. That way, he said. Back to the van. Linda trusted him. She always had. They started walking again. By 4 o'clock, the air had cooled just enough to make them shiver when they stopped. The girls were tired, their small legs dragging. They'd been walking since noon. The snacks were gone, the water bottles half empty. David checked the GPS again and frowned. We're not moving fast enough, he murmured. Linda wanted to tell him it was fine, that they'd find the van soon, but even she could hear the doubt creeping in. Then, around 5, the forest changed again. The thick trees gave way to uneven ground, tangled with roots and fallen branches. They had to climb over things now, teeter constantly. Progress slowed to almost nothing. That's when David stopped and wrote the note. He didn't say much, just tore a page from his notebook, used the pen clipped to his shirt pocket. The words came quickly, cleanly, like a man trying to organize chaos. If someone finds this... Linda watched him fold it, seal it in the plastic bag with a photo she always kept in her wallet. The one from Emma's third-grade school picture. He looked up at the tree beside him, a pine with a thick branch jutting out just at eye level. "This will help us," he said quietly. "If we see again, we'll know we're walking in circles." He hung the keys. And that's the moment, the last decision that made sense. When they walked away, they believed they were heading towards safety. In reality, they were walking deeper into nowhere. The terrain grew rougher, the light dimmer. By 6:30, the air was cooling fast. Shadows stretched long enough to merge into one another, and soon it was hard to tell what was forest and what was just imagination of tired eyes. Sophie began to cry softly. Emma tried to be brave for her little sister, but her voice trembled too when she asked, "Mom, are we going to sleep here?" Linda didn't answer right away. "Just for a little while," she said finally. "We'll rest, then keep going." They found a small clearing near a fallen log and sat down. David handed each of them a granola bar, split the last bottle of water 4 ways. He didn't eat. He was too busy looking at the GPS, as if he could will the little arrow to move faster. The temperature dropped fast. Mountain air doesn't linger. It falls like a stone once the sun goes down. The girls huddled together under Linda's jacket. Around 8:30, the forest went dark. You don't understand how dark until you've been there. The kind of dark where your flashlight only makes a small circle reality and everything outside of it feels like it's breathing. The kind where every sound, the wind, the creak of a branch, the drip of condensation, sounds like a whisper meant only for you. They didn't sleep much that night. David tried, but he kept sitting up, checking the compass, the GPS, watching the blinking light that told him it was still alive. At some point, Sophie started wheezing. Her asthma. Linda scrambled in her pack, found the inhaler, and held it to her daughter's lips. Sophie breathed deep, then smiled weakly. "It's okay, Mommy," she whispered. Linda pressed her forehead against her daughter's and nodded, though she didn't believe it. By dawn, the forest had changed again. Cold mist clung to ground, wrapping the trees in gauze. Their water was almost gone. David wanted to start moving early, before the heat rose. "For miles," he told Linda. "That's all we need. We just have to keep heading southwest." But even the GPS seemed confused now. The compass flickered. The arrow stuttered between directions. Maybe it was the mineral content in the ground. Maybe the magnetic interference from the geothermal vents. But it was no longer reliable. By noon, they were lost completely. And dehydration is a quiet killer. It doesn't come with drama. It comes with confusion, with arguments about which way is west, with the realization that your mouth is too dry to talk anymore. Linda tried to keep the girls moving, telling stories, singing softly to fill the silence. She told Emma about the horses they'd see in Yellowstone, told Sophie she could collect all the rocks she wanted when they got there. Sophie nodded, but her eyes were glassy. By mid-afternoon, the sky turned overcast. Thunder grumbled somewhere far away. David's hands shook when he tried to hold the GPS. He dropped it once, picked it up, wiped dirt from the screen. The arrow blinked, turned red, then died. Battery low. He laughed, a short, broken sound. Linda looked at him. "It's okay," she said. "We'll find the van." He didn't answer. By the second evening, they were running on willpower alone. Emma's legs buckled more than once. Sophie barely spoke. They found shelter under a rock overhang, a shallow cave barely big enough for the 4 of them. David gathered fallen branches, tried to start a small fire with the matches from the van's emergency kit. The wood was damp. The flame hissed out. Linda held the girls close, whispering prayers into their hair. When David sat beside her, she looked at him and said, "If something happens, promise me you'll stay with him." He nodded. "Always." No one knows exactly what happened after that, but rescuers would later find small traces, fabric fibers clinging to a rock, what looked like a child's shoe sole half buried in soil, scattered bones decades later that matched their DNA. It paints a picture not of a single moment of tragedy, but of slow surrender, of exhaustion, exposure, and the terrible kindness of the wilderness reclaiming what it takes. Back in 2001, when they didn't show up at Yellowstone, the first call came from Linda's sister. She called the Madison campground. No one had checked in under the name Martinez. She called their cell phone, straight to voicemail. By that night, Idaho State Police had the report. The next morning, search teams were deployed. Helicopters, dogs, volunteers. They found the van quickly. Forest Service Road 376, mile marker 12. The engine was still warm when they found it, which meant the family hadn't been gone long. Luggage in the back. Cooler half full of food. A road map on the dash with a pen mark circling Yellowstone. Everything neat. Everything normal, except for the absence of the people who belonged there. At first, it seemed simple. Maybe they'd gone to find help. Maybe they were already on their way out. But the longer the search went on, the less sense it made. The dogs picked up a scent northeast of the van, heading toward the thermal region, but then lost it completely near the sulfur vents. Handlers noted that the gases might have interfered with the dogs' noses. Helicopters scanned the area, but the tree canopy was too thick. Search teams covered over 100 square miles. They found nothing, not a single trace. After 2 weeks, the operation scaled back. Theories started to circulate. Maybe the family wandered off in another direction. Maybe they'd fallen into one of the geothermal pits. Maybe they'd been attacked by animals. Maybe, as some whispered, they'd simply vanish into the forest like ghosts. The media called it the vanishing family. But Rosa and Eduardo Torres, the grandparents, never believed the forest could keep that kind of secret forever. Every year, Rosa mailed new flyers to ranger stations across Idaho. Missing since August 13th, 2001. Last seen driving a green Dodge Caravan. She never stopped believing someone would find something. And then, 23 years later, a photographer named Eric Chin called the authorities from a satellite phone, standing beside a pine tree with a set of keys hanging from its branch. When Detective Laura Morrison reopened the case in 2024, she sat with that note for hours. Read it, reread it, trace the handwriting with her finger. If someone finds this, it wasn't panic. It was purpose. David Martinez had done everything right. He'd left a sign, a message, a trail. It just took 23 years for the world to notice. And as investigators prepared a new search, armed with drones, mapping software, and forensic tools that hadn't existed when the Martinez family vanished, Laura Morrison stood at that same tree and whispered, "We're here, David. We found your note. We're listening." Because the wilderness keeps its secrets. But sometimes it also tells them. Because the wilderness keeps its secrets. But sometimes it also tells them. When the Idaho State Police reopened the Martinez case in June of 2024, the file was older than most of the detectives assigned to it. 2 inches thick, yellowed at the edges, sealed with a red sticker that said closed, presumed fatal. Detective Laura Morrison sat in the cold case room and stared at the note that had started it all again. The handwriting, the date, the names. She was 17 when the Martinez family disappeared. Back then, she'd seen their faces on the news every night for weeks. David's steady smile, Linda's calm eyes, the 2 little girls with matching dresses. She remembered her mother turning off the TV one evening and saying, "I hope they find them." 23 years later, Laura was the one who finally could. She started with the coordinates where Eric Chin had found the keys. Then she drew a perimeter 8 miles wide, centered on that tree. The 2001 search had gone no farther than 5 miles from the van. The Martinez family had been right there, just beyond the edge of help. This time, the search would be different. On June 20th, 2024, the operation began. Instead of helicopters, they used drones, sleek, quiet machines with infrared cameras and 3D scanners that could read the contours of the Earth like Braille. They could see heat signatures beneath canopy, trace depressions in soil, and map changes invisible to the naked eye. Instead of paper maps, they had LiDAR-generated terrain models, rendering every ridge, ravine, and geothermal pocket in digital relief. Instead of guesswork, they had algorithms, programs that could calculate the probable radius of human movement based on terrain slope, daylight, hydration level, and fatigue. But the forest didn't make it easy. Even in summer, the Caribou-Targhee National Forest is a labyrinth of ridges and shadows. The thermal fields distort both compass and drone sensors. The air smells faintly of sulfur, a reminder that beneath the surface, the earth is still breathing fire. Laura's team set up a command post near mile marker 12, the same spot where the green Dodge Caravan had been found back in 2001. Erickson joined them for the first few days. He'd offered to guide them to the exact tree where he'd found the keys. He said it didn't feel right to stay home. The hike took nearly 5 hours through dense brush and uneven terrain. When they reached it, everyone went quiet. The keys were gone, sealed now in an evidence locker. But the branch still bore the faint indentation where the metal had hung. Time had bent it slightly downward, as though the tree itself had grown tired of holding on to the past. Laura knelt and placed a small marker at the base of the trunk, a GPS beacon. "This is where it starts," she said softly. Over the next 3 weeks, the search fanned out in concentric circles from that point. On June 25th, a drone operator named Miles spotted something unusual, an unnatural line beneath the soil near a cluster of rocks. A trench, maybe, or erosion. Ground teams hiked in. What they found wasn't a trench. It was a shallow depression beneath a large, overhanging boulder. The soil inside was darker, richer, compacted differently from the surrounding ground. Laura crouched inside and brushed her gloved hand over the dirt. Something soft flaked beneath her touch. Fabric, cotton or polyester, faded, fragile. "Mark it," she said. "Flag for forensic." Later, analysis would show traces of polyester consistent with early 2000s outdoor wear, likely a child jacket. The discovery pushed the search deeper. On July 3rd, a cadaver dog named Luna alerted near a small ravine about a mile east of the depression site. The handler called it in. Within hours, teams with trowels and brushes were combing the area inch by inch. They found a fragment of shoe rubber. The tread still visible, small enough to fit a child's foot. Nearby, 2 tiny bone fragments, scattered by time and animals. They stopped counting after that. Every recovery site in wilderness search is quiet. No one speaks above a whisper. Even the radios seem to lower their voices. Laura stood at the edge of the ravine that evening as the sun fell behind the pines. Eric stood beside her, camera hanging and used at his side. 23 years, he said. "Yeah, they were right here all along." Laura nodded. "They never made it back to the van. They must have tried to find shelter here, maybe the second night. The terrain, the weather, it fits." She paused. He was trying to save them. Eric glanced at her. "David, yeah, every choice he made makes sense. Until it doesn't." The next morning, they found more fragments, enough for forensic teams to start preliminary DNA extraction. Samples were sent to the state lab in Boise and to a private genetic facility in Colorado that specialized in cold case identification. It would take weeks for the results, but everyone already knew what they'd find. Because sometimes closure is a surprise. It's a confirmation of what the heart already understands. By August, the official report was ready. DNA confirmed a match to David and Linda Martinez, and partial matches to Emma and Sophie based on mitochondrial lineage. The family had died within a 2-mile radius of the Keys location, most likely from hypothermia and dehydration within 48 hours of leaving their van. No sign of foul play. No sign of struggle. Just 4 people swallowed by a vast, indifferent wilderness. The story made national headlines for a week. The lost family found after 23 years. News anchors spoke in soft tones, calling it a tragic but moving discovery. Social media rediscovered the old photos. David's easy grin, Linda's warm eyes, the girls in their matching dresses, and flooded them with candle emojis and the hashtag Martinez family. But behind the headlines, in a small house in Phoenix, the news landed differently. When Detective Morrison called Rosa Torres, Linda's mother, the line went silent for a long time. Then Rosa said, "You found them." Her voice didn't tremble. It broke only once when she whispered, "Were they together?" Laura said yes. Rosa closed her eyes and nodded. Good. That's what matters. She didn't want the photos, the remains, or the evidence. She wanted to see the tree. So, in September 2024, the Forest Service arranged it. Rosa, 76, frail but determined, hiked the final stretch on horseback, escorted by rangers and Laura herself. When she reached the clearing, the afternoon light poured through the canopy like gold dust. Someone had placed a small bronze plaque at the base of the tree. It read, "In memory of the Martinez family lost August 13th, 2001. Found June 15th, 2024, they walked toward hope." Rosa dismounted slowly, took off her hat, and knelt in front of the plaque. She stayed there for a long time. No tears. Just the sound of the wind and the quiet hum of a world that keeps moving forward even when we can't. Finally, she touched the bark of the tree. "Thank you," she whispered, "for holding them until we came back." That winter, Eric Chin published a photo essay in National Geographic titled, "The Tree That Waited." It wasn't sensational. It wasn't even about the tragedy. It was about time, how the wilderness keeps stories, how it hides them until someone worthy comes looking. One photo showed the branch where the keys had hung, now empty, the indentation still visible. Another showed Rosa's hand resting on the plaque. In the closing caption, Eric wrote, "The wilderness is not cruel. It is honest. It takes what it takes and gives back what it can." The Martinez family didn't vanish. They became part of the place they loved. And when the light finally hit just right, they told us where to look. Every August, the Forest Service places a small bouquet of wildflowers at the tree. No ceremony, no crowd. Just a quiet gesture for the ones who never came home. Sometimes hikers find it by accident. They see the plaque, take off their hats, and stand in silence. Most of them never know the full story. They just feel something in the air, a stillness that asks for respect. Detective Morrison keeps the note framed above her desk. The paper is yellowed, but the ink is still legible. If someone finds this, she looks at it sometimes when the new cases pile up, when the world feels too big and too careless. It reminds her that some stories take decades to finish, that hope can hang from a tree for 23 years and still be found. And sometimes when the evening light hits her office window just right, the reflection of that note glints faintly on the wall, like a flash of sunlight through pine needles. The forest doesn't speak, but it remembers. It remembers a man who hung his keys on a tree and believed it would help. It remembers the laughter of two little girls chasing light through the woods. It remembers a mother who carried warmth through cold nights. It remembers a family that walked toward hope. And for 23 years, waited to be found. And now, finally, it remembers them by name.